Natalie, Janet, are you there? Maybe are your mics on? We don't hear anything from anybody just yet.
There you go. We were just muted. Sorry.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Okay then, so welcome to our session, and thank you, Steve, for handing over to us, and thank you, Jane and Di, for a fabulous session and kicking the day off, really. So as you can see, we are together in person here in sunny Swansea, and myself and Janet, we'll do some introductions in a minute, but we're here today to talk to you about autonomy and academic freedom. So in terms of introductions, my name's Natalie Forde-Leaves. I'm a senior lecturer at Cardiff Business School in Wales, which, if the international community aren't aware, Wales is in the UK. And I'm doing my doctorate in autonomy, and I'm applying autonomy to assessment and looking at academic freedom in assessment, really. So it's quite closely linked to some of the concepts in today's session.
And I'm Janet Francis. I'm a computing lecturer at Staffordshire University, but I'm also an Ed.D. student, and I'm hoping to complete this year, if that's possible. So we're both Ed.D. students, and we're both using autonomy as our analytical toolkit. We're researching into different aspects of academic autonomy in HE. And as part of our CPD, we're conducting a small survey that we hope will result in a paper. So we're really hoping that you'll help us with that. We'll be sharing some of our experiences as we move through, and we really hope that we can learn something about yours as well in a sort of more interactive part of the session. Yeah. We're all working in different academic contexts, all of us here, and some of us in different parts of the world. So hopefully this will be quite interesting, and we hope that you'll join in because we need your help.
Yeah, but we don't have anything as flashy as Google Slides. So but we do have a survey, so yeah. So it will be interactive. Okay then, so I just wondered, could you just type into the chat, please, your concepts of academic freedom? So when we say about academic freedom, what does that mean for you, really? And I've got one screen with the chat up on here, so if you could just type up some ideas about academic freedom, that would be fantastic. And we'll see what we come up with. I can't see anyone yet. Choice about how I design curriculum.
Still typing. I'm still typing, hang on.
Fantastic. Get freedom to think through alternatives. So we've got perspectives on pedagogy, being able to use pedagogies that are research informed, create my own lesson plans. Fantastic. So we'll just get some more space to use my professional judgment. Yeah, absolutely perfect. So there's obviously the notion of freedom, the notion of autonomy, freedom to make informed positions. And I mean, we already see this idea about informed positions coming through. So is there a right way of having freedom or a wrong way of having freedom, and not constrained by political agendas? Fantastic. Okay, so I've just got a quote here. And this quote is by Tite from 1988, so it's quite an old quote, but academic freedom refers to the freedom of individuals to study, teach, research and publish. So covers quite a vast array of both research and pedagogic practice, if you like, without being subject to or causing undue interference. So you get this idea about interference from somewhere else, maybe from outside of academia, but maybe from within academia as well. And there's also, as you can see, I've highlighted here, some idea about this worthwhile knowledge, so that there's some kind of legitimation construed within that as well, and it being supported by society through funding of academics. So maybe there's some economic issues going on here. So, so I put a blue sky picture there, and I don't know if that is blue sky thinking, if you like. So is that reality? So what about this slide then? So in terms of reality, I don't know, the international community might not be familiar with the University of Leicester, but from a UK perspective, exactly 1 year ago today, on January the 18th, 2021, 16 academics, members of the business school, were sent an email saying that they were due to face redundancy essentially for their research outputs. So the school dean had said they were divesting from research in critical management studies and political economy, and that academics' research no longer fitted the strategic reorientation of the school, and the school were kind of going more mainstream in their outlook. And I probably should have caveated, sorry if anyone takes offence or if anyone's from Leicester here, that we're just using kind of news that's out there to illustrate our point. And it's not only Leicester, so I think Janet's got another example.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the very recent example of Kathleen Stock in Sussex University. She's a philosophy scholar with views on gender, and obviously gender's in the public eye quite a bit at the moment, and it's quite an emotive subject. And she actually felt unable to continue with her work because of a number of protests and banners which were actually saying "stock out," as you can see on the top of our screen there. So there's a lot of support, but also a lot of protests, and she eventually left the university because of that.
Yeah, and it's not only Kathleen Stock or members of kind of Leicester academic staff, but there are hundreds of academics out there who have been constrained through not speaking at universities, or even being sacked and persecuted for their views. And they could be political views, or they could be practices, they could be pedagogic practices. So there's a website here called Academics for Academic Freedom, and you can look on that website and you can see those stories of those 100 academics, if you like. Now, obviously we're in international context, but from a UK perspective, these academics should be protected by law. So there is a law which is the Section 43 of the Education Act, so the Section 43 duty, where universities have a duty, a legal duty, to secure freedom of speech for its members, students, employees, and visiting professors. So obviously something is going wrong somewhere. So there is at the moment in the UK a kind of governmental reform around freedom for academic free speech. And there's a bill that's recently going through now. And part of those suggestions in that bill is that they appoint a free speech and academic freedom champion to the Office for Students Board, which is our kind of UK governance body, if you like. And obviously that bill has been informed by things like governmental reports, so the Joint Committee on Human Rights report that identified a few reasons why academic freedom was being infringed, and they included things like violent protests, incorrect use of no platforming policies, complex regulation, increased bureaucracy, all of these kind of constraints to academic freedom. So that's just an insight into kind of the UK law and kind of policy literature as well. But obviously there's a huge discourse around academic freedom, huge discourse around academic identity and the constraints and the deprofessionalisation thesis. Now, the academic freedom is in both of our doctorates, isn't it? So we're both interested in it, but there's so much literature that we can't go through here. But we've just made this slide to show how the advent of neoliberalism kind of shifts in governance, shifts from collegiate management governance to more kind of a managerial control environments, shifts from kind of regulations, from academically oriented regulations to now more audits and performativity. So huge shifts towards this kind of increased heightened managerialist environment, and also pressure from outside. So the consumerist agenda, viewing students as consumers, the CMA, consumers being protected, academics being concerned about student satisfaction, things like that. They all have huge implications for academic identity. So you can see these cogs turning and resulting in this kind of deprofessionalisation and erosion of academic identity.
So how are we all feeling about our academic autonomy? To what extent do we as academics feel our academic freedom is enabled or constrained in our practice, for example, in our teaching or our research, whichever contract that we feel we are on. Do academics feel they have academic freedom in teaching or research? Our research lies in the field of higher education, and we are using the Forde-Leavian concept of field as a closed system where institutions and actors are involved in various practices. The boundaries between Forde-Leavian fields can be weak, and that means that the actions of actors or institutions in one field can impact on the actions of actors or institutions in another field. And we've got a couple of pictures at the bottom there. The one on the left-hand side really represents the academic institutions where we look at lifelong learning, and we're teaching because we want people to understand what we're doing and to actually become lifelong learners. Whereas the one on the right is really where education is more of a system, and education itself is commoditized, and the learners are really turned into consumers of that education.
Yeah, and is this kind of move from the Humboldtian liberal type university and the disinterested pursuit of knowledge and truth to this kind of muck university, the university that serves a whole load of different stakeholders and has that graduate churn for the labour market, etc., standardised production of graduates, that whole kind of neoliberal argument. Okay.
So we're moving now to the application of legitimation code theory in this study. We got there eventually.
And maybe we should just say it didn't start as a study. This was really just an idea for the conference. But then we thought, you know what, we've had a little look into it. We're so excited about it. Maybe we can turn it into a paper. So fingers crossed, we're going to have a bit more interaction with you in a minute, and maybe get a research output.
Yeah, we need your help on this. So just a bit of a sort of preamble about the autonomy dimension, really. The autonomy dimension of LCT, which is what we're working with, is a measure of the insulation of aspects of practice. So the aspects of interest are grouped as constituents and relations. So constituents are tangible ideas, beliefs, topics, and the relations are our ways of working, our governance. So the autonomy codes are positional autonomy, which we refer to as PA, which is a measure of how insulated the constituents in the home territory of higher education are from those in another, for example, industry or politics. And relational autonomy, which we refer to as RA, measures how insulated the relations between the constituents in the home category are from those with constituents in other categories. So PA and RA can be varied along a scale. So in higher education, the context is a department, or you might call it a school or a faculty, within an HE institution, a university perhaps, in a particular country. So for me, it's a so-called new university in the UK. The practice is either teaching or research, very much depending on the nature of your contract that you're on. And the constituents are topics of teaching, so content of the curriculum or a module, or the research agenda. And the relations are the rule that govern the practice. So for example, in research, it might be an ethical framework. In teaching, it might be quality management.
It might be a good point here just to ask the audience, and how, if maybe you could do a hands up virtually through Zoom. So how many of you are kind of au fait with autonomy, or maybe this is all new to you? Maybe pop your hands up.
The autonomy dimension.
Yeah, the autonomy dimension of LCT. If you can pop your hand up if you think you are relatively comfortable with it.
Are there any hands up?
I'm not sure.
Let's see.
I've got a hand.
Yeah.
One hand, a little bit. Okay. Well, we've got the next slide that'll kind of go through the autonomy dimension, and then hopefully we will
Hopefully.
lower intermediate speaker. Yeah. Hopefully by the end of the session, you will you'll feel a bit more comfortable with it.
Okay, so how do we get on to plotting the autonomy then? So this is the autonomy dimension. We've got the PA and the RA planes which are crossing, and you can see there that there are 4 quadrants. And basically the sovereign codes, which if you see where the sovereign quadrant is, we've got PA and RA, PA plus and RA plus. These are insiders, so people inside HE, for example, operating to insider principles, so the principles of HE in this case. The exotic codes are, as the name suggests, they are the opposite to that. So that would be outsiders, people from different fields, perhaps an employer, operating to outsider principles. The introjected codes, which are PA minus and RA plus, are outsiders operating to insider principles, and the projected codes are the opposite to that, PA plus and RA minus, which is insiders operating to outsider principles. So over to Natalie for a look at setting the target.
Yeah, so in taking that autonomy dimension now and applying it to our own study, then we need to understand the target. So Carl and Sarah Howard, in their kind of seminal occasional paper and later on in their teaching science, explain a target as what constitutes beliefs, ideas, what constituents, beliefs, ideas, actors, and what principles are considered constitutive of this context or category here in this space and time for these actors. And this gives a target. And the target usually emanates from your data, really. So if you are interviewing members of staff, then you would say, okay, well, the target for these members of staff would be X or would be Y. So we don't have any data yet, but we do have our own experiences. So we've almost set the target as an autoethnography. So what do we perceive the target for academic freedom would look like in this autonomy study? And we're also using kind of academic literature to inform that view of the target. So essentially, our target would be that the academic has control over their practices, and therefore the academic determines the research agenda. And also the way in which the academic undertakes that practice is self-determined as well. So if we go through this slide, you can see here, in terms of the focus and the basis, we're looking at academic freedom. We're trying to understand what legitimates academic freedom, what's held as legitimate academic freedom in practice. And the target is where influence and purpose over research and teaching practice derives from within the field of the university, so that academic field, if you like. And any evaluation of that research and teaching practice and the way that research and teaching practice is done is perceived as being derived from within the field of the university as well. So it's essentially the target is academic, and anything outside of target is non-academic. And that helps us set up this kind of plane for PA and RA. So for autonomy and for all dimensions of LCT, translation devices are that kind of external language of legitimation, if you like. So it's a way of moving from data and theory together, informing them. So obviously we don't have data, but as I said, we're using our own experiences. And for positional autonomy, we define this as who decides what's legitimate content for our teaching or research, and or what is a legitimate purpose for us to conduct this practice. So basically, we're saying constituents are the ideas around the research or teaching practice, and we're saying who legitimates those ideas, who controls that research or who controls that teaching practice. And if that control is by the academic, then that would be a very strong positional autonomy. If control over that research or teaching is from outside, non-academic, then that's weaker positional autonomy. So those are the two kind of polar opposites, if you like. So positional autonomy looks at what we're teaching and who controls what we're teaching. And relational autonomy looks at how we do that. So from where do the rules that govern how we conduct our practice emanate? So who's controlling how we are practicing, the ways of practicing? If the ways of practicing are academic, that's strong relational autonomy. And if those ways that we're practicing come from outside, that's weaker relational autonomy. So that's the translation device that we will apply to our data, hopefully when we get some.
So I just wanted to talk at this point about the use of perceptions, because we're interested in your perceptions rather than objective facts, because you might not know what the objective facts about autonomy in your institution, in your particular context are. But what you will do is you'll have a very good idea of how you're constrained and where the constraints are. So effectively, we're not looking for objective facts. We're not looking for you to tell us what the rules are in your particular context. We're actually looking for you to tell us what you've experienced, what you perceive you could do, and where you perceive the constraints are. And hopefully what we can then use that for is to find out what the unobservable but very real mechanisms are that have created those perceptions that you have.
And Janet didn't want to say it, but she's kind of using critical realist speak here, because she's very clever, and our study is grounded in that kind of critical realist, you know, LCT, that understanding that people can experience the same event very differently and perceive it very differently.
Yeah, and that there is this objective reality out there which is enshrined in law, that people will see that very differently. They'll perceive things differently depending on their actual experiences. So I just put this up really just to go back to what we're saying about Leicester University and Kathleen Stock, and the fact that if you look at the examples on the right, these are from Twitter, and these are perceptions of autonomy based on experience of individuals, and they've tweeted various things saying that they're facing redundancy because they are focusing on research which is outside of the strategic focus of their department now. But then actually if you look at the other excerpt, that is from the Free Speech and Academic Freedom paper, and that's basically stating that people shouldn't actually be worried about losing their jobs if they want to do particular types of research, or if they want to do particular types of teaching. So two things are very different. One is what you might call the objective fact, whereas the other is a perception based on someone's real experience, real lived experience.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking for. We'll kind of do a call for views in a minute now using our survey tool. But so we're looking for your perceptions. So ultimately, this autonomy tool could deliver 4 autonomy codes. So those autonomy codes in the kind of the sovereign code would be where the academic has influence over their practice and practices are academic. Complete opposite of that would be the exotic. So non-academic may have influence and practices are non-academic. So maybe using kind of semantic speak, this is very all theoretical at the moment. So Jane and Di, what would that be? Is that kind of low semantic gravity, for example? So very theoretical and abstract, but hopefully you want to make it more concrete with your own examples. So you've got these 4 quadrants, and maybe you'll say, oh yeah, I'm definitely in sovereign, or I've got experiences of being in exotic, but there are more nuanced approaches. So what we've done in our translation device, by splitting up that translation device into 4 different levels of positional autonomy, PA++, PA+, PA-, and by splitting up relational autonomy the same way, you can see you would almost come up with 16 different positions, if you like. So, for example, if you were PA++, the academic would have influence, and RA++, the research or the teaching is done in accordance with kind of academic principles, you'd be up kind of in this top right-hand corner here, just as academic lecturers were in Leicester, for example, before the university took control. So if the university takes control of that research agenda and says, you will not publish in critical management journals, then obviously there's a weakening, and the university now has influence over the research agenda. So the PA now is only plus, because that's the university exerting control, not the individual academic. So you can see how you can move around in the sovereign and still have huge ramifications for academic freedom, but still be inside academia and inside the university. So these 16 different positions we have theorised, and you don't have to read this, don't all kind of worry. We've theorised them and given examples of how we think this would play out. So we've got some definitions and some examples, but we need your help to see where you would fit, if you like, and so where some of your experiences fit. So myself and Janet, we're going to run through some examples and show you where we fit, and then we'll hand over to you and see where you might fit on here. So I'll do the first one.
Yeah.
My name's Natalie, obviously. I'm a student in the Sockside Department of Education in my university. It's an elite Russell Group university. I've told you it's Cardiff Uni, so it's not anonymous, but that's where I'm from. And I'm undertaking my doctoral research. So in terms of questions then, if we think about positional autonomy and this scenario of me doing my doctorate in Cardiff Uni, who do I perceive as having most control or influence over my research agenda, and what is their purpose? Well, I think that I've got control over what I am studying to research for my doctorate. And the way in which I do that, so relational autonomy, in this scenario, where do I perceive the rules and governance of my research emanate? Well, the university isn't actually putting any kind of goals on me. It's not saying, Natalie, as in my line management of me, not saying, Natalie, you must have done this by this date. I'm taking it relatively in my stride, which is probably why I need to get it done in the last 3 to 6 months. And maybe I needed micromanaging through this. Maybe I needed somebody to kind of force me to get it done. But I would say that I've got control over the way in which I do it and when I do it and how I fit it into my working life. So I would say I'm up here. I'm the red dot. What about you, Janet? Where would you be?
What about me? So yeah, I'm Janet, and I'm a student in the Department of Education in my university, which is a provincial English post-1992 university, so a modern university. And I'm undertaking an ND, which is research. So in terms of the questions then, in this scenario, who do I perceive as having most control or influence over my research agenda, and what is their purpose? Well, I'm doing the ND for my benefit, really. I'm very grateful for the support the university has given me. In terms of ways of working, I'm bound by the time constraints that come with having a full-time job. So my time is not my own, and my perception is that I'm not as free as Natalie is to decide when I do my work because of the constraints. So where would I be? My dot is in a bit of a different position, but it's still in the same quadrant. So the difference probably reflects the different types of universities that we work in. And movements within the same quadrant are termed autonomy drift. And I perceive that there is a drift in the research, the nature of the research between the different universities that we find ourselves working in.
Okay, so I'll do another one. Another example how you can apply this tool. I was previously a lecturer at a professional education company, privately funded. So I taught accounting to people in accounting business, and they were studying to be a chartered accountant, if you like. And it's a private education provider. So in this context then, if I'm thinking about PA, who do I perceive as having most control influence over my pedagogic practice? So who determines what I teach? Well, everything I taught was predetermined. The notes were made for me, the syllabus was already done. I had zero freedom because I was teaching the ACCA qualification. That was what I was doing. So in this situation, a PSRB, which is a professional or statutory regulatory body, so this was an accreditation body, a professional body for accountants, they determined what I taught. So they had complete kind of control over what I was doing. The way in which I did it, so when I went into work and I had to deliver this course, what I was teaching, when I was teaching, where I was teaching it, what I taught on which day, the way it was assessed, everything that was happening around this teaching was told to me by my employer. So in terms of relational autonomy, then I would say that the employer, the private tuition provider, had full control over what I was doing. So I wouldn't want to say that I was just being a puppet, but I was there to deliver a syllabus on this day in this particular way. So therefore, I would place myself firmly down here in this kind of exotic quadrant with very minimal academic freedom. However, I then moved on to work in Cardiff University, and I was teaching the same thing. So I was teaching an element of the ACCA qualification, but as part of a module in an accounting course in a Russell Group institution. So this example now, I'm a senior lecturer on teaching and scholarship contract, and I'm teaching the corporate reporting course at Cardiff. And I'm engaging in curricular design, teaching and assessment for that course. So I have kind of almost full autonomy over that course. So in terms of answering these questions for this course, who determines what I teach? Well, I'd love to say I have full control, but I don't, because we still have to teach to get exemptions from the professional body. So the professional body do still say you must teach 70% of the syllabus for this qualification. So they do have control over what I'm teaching. However, when I walk into that classroom, the way I teach, the way I assess, some assessment is restricted, but the kind of the sequencing, the pacing, all of those kind of Bernsteinian ideas about framing and who has control about how I do it, well, that's me. Nobody is monitoring what I'm doing. So I've got me as an academic there. So here now I've got PA minus and RA plus. So I've shifted over to this introjected quadrant, and that might represent a one-way trip in autonomy terms.
So my turn again. So I'm an academic in the Department of Computing in my university, a provincial English post-1992 university, and I'm undertaking a KTP with a local company that want to create and patent a data mining tool to support their decision making. And that's a very interesting thing that I actually enjoy, but I didn't really have much say in whether I was going to do that or not. That was more or less given to me. So in terms of where would I put myself in terms of PA, well, the employer put in the bid and we worked with the employer, but it was very much an employer project. Myself and other members of the team could suggest ideas, but the employer, as it's going to actually be their tool, could obviously veto these. So, and as a university, if we were going to publish anything, we would need to get the employer's say so. So in terms of a PA, very much the employer as an external body. In terms of RA, where do the rules come from? Well, the research is done pretty much not as a university, but in terms of an external body, the employer, but they do loosely use the ethics of the British Computer Society, the relevant PSRB. So I would say really that probably goes there. So where would that go? Well, I would say it goes into the exotic quadrant. So when I'm moving between the two different sorts of research that I'm doing, between supervising an intern in the KTP and my own ED research, I'm making an autonomy tour sort of back and forth between those two places.
Okay then, so we did take half hour introducing that, so it's over to you. We'd like to hear about your experiences in terms of this academic freedom. And we'd like you to give us some examples. Now, we've got 26 people in the room, so we can't, and I'm still trying to keep one eye on the chat, sorry. So we've got 26 people, so we can't get everyone's views all in this live session because we've only got another 20 minutes. So what we've done is we've designed a survey, and our original idea was we'd love to get a live survey and feedback to you in a live environment, but that's probably not going to be able to happen due to time constraints. So what we'll do is we will just discuss the survey with you so you know it's there, and some of you can start filling it in if you wanted to, and then maybe other people can decide if they wanted to speak and share an experience with us and plot yourselves onto this matrix. So what I'll do first is I will just show you the survey. So we have developed a survey tool, and I even made a QR code, so I am so excited about that. So we developed, yeah, I hope it works, fingers crossed. I don't know if anyone wants to try it now. Steve's put the link to the survey online as well, which is amazing. Thank you, Steve. In the run-up to this conference, as in a few days ago, I actually got ethical approval for this as well. So we're nearly there on like a full-blown kind of, this is a research project. So we've got a survey tool, it's very short, it's literally the 2 questions that we've been asking you. And we would like you to submit your views and your experiences through that survey in the hope that we can actually write this up and get some really great data to supplement our kind of autoethnographic theory that we've been sharing with you. So the consent form is in the survey. If you can access the link, you'll see the survey there. And the participant information sheet is available as a Google Doc, so you can follow that link there, and we'll also put the link up into the chat as well. We'll do that in a moment. And the survey will be open for 30 days, but ideally we'd like to get some feedback now. But please do complete it at your free will. All responses will be anonymous, so if you mention any names of institutions, we will anonymize those, give pseudonyms, etc. And we're only going to use the survey for our research. So if somebody wants to come on here and say, I'm Natalie from Cardiff and I feel I'm constrained, then we won't be using that, okay? We're not going to say Natalie from Cardiff said that she's constrained, because obviously I'm not.
Although it has been recorded.
But this is being recorded, so yeah, you might want to kind of be careful what you say. So, so if anybody wants to complete that survey, that would be absolutely fantastic if you could do that. But if anybody wants to share their perspectives live now, that would also be brilliant. So have we got any takers? Anybody want to unmute themselves and kind of share? Oh, sorry, I missed a few slides. We've just got some examples of what the survey looks like there. So,
can I jump in?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, hello. I was just thinking about those 4 questions you got on the screen now as you went through, and it's quite interesting because when I started, I just thought about it in terms of my job role, but then I realized I need to differentiate it out in terms of the different types of roles I do within my university, which is kind of what you're suggesting as you went through those examples. So that was really good. What I'll do is I'll just copy and paste what I was typing into the chat function. But essentially, I think I would probably put myself overall, if I generalize my job, as -1 and -1 in terms of my general job role. But then when I think about it in terms of when I work with the degree apprenticeship students, I would probably put it as -2, -2, because I have very little control over what I deliver. Even the content and the modules I deliver, that's been predefined by somebody else. The way I deliver that is often described or determined by somebody else, and the way I administrate those modules are also monitored and regulated by other people outside my control. So I have no control for most part of that delivery. Is that roughly what you're asking me to do?
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's a really good example. Yeah, thank you for that.
That's fantastic.
That's great.
So Janet's just done your own autonomy kind of one.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it's all a bit sort of shaky because I can't really control the thing very well, but there it is.
but it would be nice. I mean, you could use this for kind of career trajectory, couldn't you? You could say how in different examples you could do a full autonomy tour, and maybe hopefully one day you're going to be visiting that software and code, Dan.
Maybe.
Does anybody else want to have a stab at it? Anyone else got any examples they want to share?
Go on, otherwise we'll have to share some more of ours.
Well, I was wondering about hi, it's Richard here. I was wondering about the question I raised about the discipline and the research groups, and I raised this question about that I've experienced both as a doctoral student and now as a supervisor, that the choices we make about our theories and methodologies aren't actually as clear cut as we or as autonomous as we might, so what counts and who says what counts. So who says what counts in research? So I've got your survey, and I'm at the question which says, give a scenario, and I've said choice of methodology and choice of research in doctoral research, but you don't have, that's not one of the options. So I've got me as an academic, the university, the government, or an employer or other external body. So I do think that the discipline and what counts in terms of research, and I alluded to the fact that it was a struggle. Steve knows, and the people we were a small group, self-supporting group, when LCT was just it was just a germ in Carl Maton's eye. And when he came out to speak to us, so it's expanded, but it was a struggle, and that struggle is autonomy. It's an element of autonomy. So what do you think, Janet and Natalie? Have I missed a point, or do you feel you might have included the discipline? And because you mentioned, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think in our translation device, I have to go probably quite a far way back. We've got strong PA as being held with individual academics, and then PA weakens then, it's quite a way back actually. Here you go. So you can see strong PA will be with academics, and then it weakens as you go to university management. I think we would probably need to kind of disaggregate that one level further potentially. Yeah. So maybe if you disaggregated academic, you would have individual academic as PA+++, and then academic departments or academic research groups, or the academic community as another. And then that academic community could be construed as kind of research disciplinary based, or it could be pedagogic as well. So you might be doing pedagogic practice that's out of line with the pedagogic norms for your institution, or out of line with pedagogic norms for teaching in that particular discipline, for example. And again, you could probably drift into other codes here, depending on whether your discipline's a knowledge code or a knower code. But I would say that your academic discipline and the norms of the discipline that controls it would be just a component of that PA++.
Or it could be argued that it's a component of the plus rather than the plus. It's sort of between the two, isn't it? There's some influence of, I suppose, university managers and disciplines and so on. But that said, the disciplines are still academic, aren't they? So it probably would be just towards the bottom end of the plus, wouldn't it? Yeah, and that's how you've got 16 positions, but you could have a multitude of positions. So the further that you break those down, the more nuanced it becomes. And that might be something that we do with the survey tool, is potentially make it a bit more specific and break it down a little bit more.
Natalie, Janet, Marnell has a hand up and maybe has a question or a comment. Marnell, do you want to just turn your mic on?
Hi, ladies. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it. I think I see some of my other colleagues here, so we have a different scenario. And I think we, in terms of, I've just filled in your survey, so I think we obviously have quite a lot of control about what we teach and what we do research about in terms of, our choices. However, some of us are doing educational research, but we are scientists, and we are in science in the science faculty and science departments. And as such, you know, that brings constraints. So although we have all that freedom, you know, it doesn't always feel as if we have the autonomy, you know, within among our colleagues, if I can put it like that, although we are also scientists. So this is a kind of a, I think something else that I throw into this thing, because there's another layer to this.
And it's enacting your autonomy in amongst expected norms, isn't it? And I'm exactly the same. So I'm researching in pedagogic research rather than my accounting disciplinary research. And
I am, both of us are.
And I don't know if you have issues around kind of what's refable in your institution, but in a business school, pedagogic research probably is not refable. So I should be aligning with the norms of my academic community and potentially doing kind of accounting research. So yeah, I think that's quite similar to Richard's point there around the norms of your academic discipline and academic community.
Yes, thank you.
Janet, Natalie, I don't know whether you can see the chat. There's a question in there from Deborah about, Deborah, I don't know whether you want to ask the question.
Yeah, sorry, I could, yeah. I'm still trying to get my head around autonomy, so I don't know if my question makes sense, but when I look at your translation device, you seem to be focusing on the who, so the actors, and I was wondering whether you're planning to also focus on the what, so what I understand to be the ideas and beliefs.
Those are the constituents, aren't they? And you know, we're asking if those are the constituents, the ideas or beliefs, who has the most control in terms of those constituents. So if you want to teach a particular subject, or if you want to teach it and include various aspects of it, do you choose that, or is it chosen by academic managers, or is it chosen by the university? If you wanted to research a particular area, who would choose that for you? That's so the constituents, so that the ideas, the beliefs, the topics of the research, and then we're asking, where does the, you know, who decides?
Yeah, I think you could probably do a secondary study into looking at the legitimacy of what you're researching. So you might have full control to research, and you might research in a very accepted, generalized, mainstream topic, or you might research in something critical management studies in Leicester, for example, which is very controversial. So I don't know if, in answer to your question, we don't pick apart whether you're researching in mainstream or controversial topics, but I think that again could be something we could add on to this study as a complementary. So once we've established, do you have academic freedom using this tool, there could then be a secondary tool, whether that's autonomy or specialization or another dimension, another tool to look at what you're researching in and whether that's legitimate in your field. So I think that's quite a good, it's a good thing to think about. It is. If we take this forward, definitely.
I think Rita's come up with something else, which is, I think we discussed this as well between ourselves, in that there are complicating factors, and it really, I think we decided it just came down to individual perceptions of where that comes from. Because I think we have our own perceptions, and I think there are objective realities, and there are other perceptions of objective realities, and it's where we perceive that that decision is being made individually.
Yeah, and on the survey, Rita, we tried to account for university imposing their values on academics by trying to understand what type of university it was. So if you look on the survey, it says, is your university an elite research focused or a non-elite teaching focused? So again, this is the first layer of analysis. We could add another layer to look at what those university values are. And that would be a secondary analysis. At the moment, we're just saying, is the academic controlled by the university or not? Secondary to that, we could say, okay, well, let's pick apart those university values. Are they in line more with academic or more with industry? But this first layer just kind of separates out the stakeholders. So it's almost a model of stakeholder involvement, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a crude model to a point, because, you know, we've taken it down to 4 positions in each quadrant, but, you know, there could be many more, and we understand that. But you know, this is a crude model, I suppose, at the start of our investigation in this area, really.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why we're here today presenting to you as well, is so we can get all this valuable feedback and hopefully then supplement this model by delving into some of these ideas around whether your university is a kind of neoliberal type supportive university. It goes back to those pictures at the beginning, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Like, could we map respondents, so your respondents, with maybe the type of university that you're coming from? We've also included a question about country, so it might be different internationally. There are different perspectives on academic autonomy.
So what's this question? Is there a way to show on the device how entrenched the autonomy category is? It's a good thing, isn't it? Do some lecturers challenge norms? That was what you were discussing, wasn't it?
Yeah, see, I think that would come into the what, so whether you're researching in a controversial area or not, or if you're teaching. So pedagogy could be quite traditional or quite progressive, so that might have different implications. I can see Lee's got her hand up.
Yeah. Hi, this is such an engaging session. I've really enjoyed it. So just one thing that I've thought about is here in South Africa, certainly wherever the funding is, that kind of may influence people, you know, where people go to the research. Whether that's been also something that you've looked at, a factor about where the funding is, and whether that is something else that goes from beyond.
Yeah, definitely. So in this matrix, we haven't put funding explicitly as PA or explicitly as RA, because an employer could fund a research project, but say to the academics, look, I'm funding this, but you're the experts, you do what you want with it. Or an employer, industry, could fund a project and say, I'm funding this project, so I want tight control over it. So I don't want to go into Bernstein, but it's almost as though PA is classification, so insulation of who gets involved, and RA is the framing, so who controls it. And I think funding could be in either. So or both.
From different, you know, perspectives, because in an apprenticeship you might have the Department of Education, the UK Department of Education, deciding on whether they sign off on behaviours and skills that go into the apprenticeship standard, which then dictates how we can design our courses around that. But then they'll send Ofsted in to do the QA, which is another government body. So they're both controlled by different parts of the government, and one's controlling the content and the other's controlling the ways of working.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anyone else got any questions, or does anyone else want to share experience? And we can't finish. I was going to say we couldn't finish early.
No, you're not finishing early. Colleagues, this is fantastic. I wanted to connect to what Lee's just said. And it was interesting because so I went to your survey and I thought I'd just come through the experience of applying for promotion and applying to the National Research Foundation. When you see who's in this meeting, that's fine. Okay, just worried about what I say. But, and I was struck by Shoba actually pointing out that if you took this plane, so some of us academics, as Marnell pointed out earlier, have different PARA relations in terms of, well, the same end goal, enabling students to successfully move through a higher education system. But our Department of Education is really strong. Then we have our professional bodies, the same as you pointed out before. And then we have the academic game, which in the UK is your, what do you call it? The research excellence.
Yeah, research.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now we've got our NRF. And the point is that when you are an agent who straddles multiple spaces, you work in a, let's say for me as an academic developer, I work with lecturers themselves. And in that space, it's, let's say, the dean and management and these engineering standards that govern everyone. In terms of me doing the same thing, trying to enable professional development of staff in the space. But when I then move into the government agency space, in relation to the same issue, there's a shift, okay, in this whole plane. And then when I move in relation to the super government agency, which is the funding body, so the National Research Foundation, which is your REF, your Research Excellence Framework type thing, those all have different, there are different agents in those spaces with different levels of autonomy, with different discourses, and that imply a kind of a dislocation very often for, if I say, the primary agent whom you're trying to place in those different spaces. So there's a different kind of shifting that then happens in relation to those different bodies that you can't necessarily, so your target would have to be, in other words, I keep on wanting to go to specialization and epistemic relations and go ontic relations, that the phenomenon you're addressing needs to be quite strong, clearly bounded, to be able to plot all these people in relation to each other. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. I've just realized that we sometimes feel totally dislocated because actually the positional and relational autonomy so differs in these different contexts for the same agent moving into those spaces.
Yeah,
that is,
yeah. So one person's sovereign is another person's exotic, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think our idea is that if we keep the target as academic having control and you have self-determined processes, then all of this splintering, all of this acting in different locations, if you plotted all of those instances onto the plane, you would see exactly how academic identity is splintered and fractured. And I think the more fractured that you are, the more deprofessionalized you've become, serving multiple masters. So I think that it's useful to have every instance on one plane to demonstrate the amount of fracturing, if you like. If that answers that.
Yes. And in our South African context, we are particularly fractured.
No, I think it's also in the UK as well, definitely.
Yeah, we're going to have to wind up, aren't we?
Yeah,
so I think we just need to beg people to do the survey once again, don't we?
Yeah. And thank you so much for everyone's feedback. It's been absolutely fabulous. We're going to try and keep the chat. I might have to ask Steve. I don't know how to keep the chat, but we'll keep everyone's feedback, and we will hopefully welcome your survey responses. And if we publish this, we will send it to everyone, and we'll do a round table.
At the round table, yes, if we can. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening and taking part.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Janet. Thanks, Natalie. I've saved the chat, so I can ping that to you in Teams or send that to you via your email or something. Okay, I think we're a couple of minutes early, so I know the YouTube elves will be we'll get into trouble if we start the new session too early. So maybe a 1-2 minute breather if people need to kind of jump up, grab a coffee, quick bit of exercise before we move on. Tom, I see is here. Tom, maybe if you want to kind of get the slides up and maybe get us good to go for
Hi, Steve. Hi, everyone.
So for those of you who are still with us, or for those of you who are just joining, we're moving on to session 9 in the wider program, session 3 of 4 in the UK leg of this marathon across the world. So this is Tom and myself.